All right, we've got
Good.
it. So this is a special edition of Wines Day featuring Alison from Cheval Concard. We did a big Bordeaux feature in the fall, and this is kind of catching us back up, so we have all the pieces in place. Today we're going to be talking about the Chai de Bordes Rosé and the Saint Estephe. If you want to pronounce the Cossieu Coutelin or whatever.
Chateau Cossieu Coutelin.
Yeah, there you go. So I'm still practicing, even though we've had the wine in store for about 4 months now. My name's Zach. I'm the beer and wine coordinator for the Drum Co-op. We've partnered with Alison back in August, I think, is when we started this crazy adventure, and bought a whole bunch of really delicious wine and are here to just kind of talk about it. So we're going to start off with the Chai de Bordes Rosé. This guy right here. So just nice. Yeah, cheers. And Alison, I will share the tech sheet that you sent me, and we can kind of talk about it. If you want to talk about, like, in the first series of this, we talked about the relation of Bordeaux to Napa, and I can show that map again if you would like. Don't know if I have the zoomed in Bordeaux one right now, where we kind of see where the little properties that you guys own are, but I'll go ahead and share that big map. And this is just kind of an idea of where Bordeaux is in relation to the world. And zoom in.
Yes. Southwest of France, right next to the Atlantic Ocean.
And what does the ocean do for wines? Is that, as far as like is it a maritime influence or coastal?
It's so it's a maritime influence. So the good points is that it brings there's a nice ocean breeze. So which is actually interesting with Bordeaux, because you have if you zoom in a little more, actually if you go on the second slide, so you'll see it better. Oh, maybe a little too close. So Atlantic Ocean is on the left, and so the purple part has the most maritime influence, meaning the ocean sea breeze, so it cools down the temperature. It also brings, which is a downside of it, a lot of humidity and rain, which is an issue for us in Bordeaux, because it means more fungal diseases and you need to protect the vines. So usually you have to treat it a bit more than if it was a less wet, drier. And so when you compare, for example, the purple region with the pink one or the green one, so pink one is Saint-Émilion, Pomerol, and the green one is what we call the Entre-deux-Mers. It means between two seas, which actually is a couple of rivers that you can see, that go down from the Gironde estuary, and that's it. So this area is actually a little drier, has a different soil and less influence from the ocean. So we have a little less fungal diseases than you will have on the left bank. But then again,
the purple left bank versus the right bank, which is that pink and the, I guess, blue area, right?
Yeah, anything that is, so you see the Gironde estuary, and then down is the Garonne. So that's the big, we say fleuve, so a big river. So anything on the left side of this river is the left bank. So it's the purple named Médoc region or the Grave region. And then on the right is the right bank. So you have the Entre-deux-Mers, which I mentioned earlier, the Pomerol, Saint-Émilion in pink. And then in the north, it's the Côte de Bordeaux, so Côte de Blaye, Côte de Bourg, all those Côte de Bordeaux, which are a little more specific, but we'll get to that maybe another time.
Anyways, the Entre-deux-Mers, is that where the Chai de Bordes, is that where you guys are growing this?
Precisely. So the Entre-deux-Mers, it's really the I would say the bargain place to shop Bordeaux wines. It's the largest wine growing region in Bordeaux. In this region, the wines are usually labeled either Bordeaux or Bordeaux Supérieur. And those, so Bordeaux Supérieur is only for reds. Bordeaux can be for white, rosé, or red. But you can also find some Entre-deux-Mers white only, no reds. So for example, the Cuvée Clémence. So there are various appellations. Those are more generic versus the Saint-Estephe Château Cossieu Coutelin, which is a communal appellation from the left bank Bordeaux. So when you see on the label Bordeaux, Bordeaux Supérieur, or Entre-deux-Mers, you know it's from this vast region, and it's a more, oh sorry, there's a cat meowing.
At first I thought
this time, but so yeah, anything Bordeaux, Bordeaux Supérieur, Entre-deux-Mers is from this big green region, and then when you have more specific names, it's from another region from there.
Okay. That's great. So it's kind of helps you decode the wine labels, that if you're at the co-op or in a wine store or at a restaurant, and you can kind of get an idea of what you're getting in your glass before you even open the bottle. So that's handy information.
It's usually when you think about Bordeaux and you think you want something that has body structure, tannins, maybe a bit of earthy notes, you will probably go for a left bank wine, so purple region. So you will get a Saint-Estèphe, for example, or you will get a Médoc or Médoc. If you're willing to spend a lot of money, you can buy a Pauillac, a Saint-Julien, and those big names. But those are have mostly Cabernet Sauvignon in their blend. And that's mainly due to the soil. In this part of Bordeaux, we have a lot of gravels and also limestone, in which Cabernet Sauvignon really likes to grow. So this is mostly Cabernet Sauvignon based wines, and we blend it with Merlot and sometimes some other grapes. You can find Petit Verdot or Malbec, but it's usually Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot anywhere in Bordeaux. So big wines on the left bank, and then on the right bank. So if you go in, so either in the blue or the purple region, especially in the not purple, sorry, the pink in the blue region, you have mostly Merlot in the blend. Actually, you can include the thing on the right bank has mostly Merlot in it. And Merlot brings a lot of roundness, some fruit aromas. It's very easy, fresh. The only issue at the moment is that Merlot is a grape that can ripen earlier than the Cabernet Sauvignon. So the challenge at the moment in Bordeaux is that we are facing some global warming effects. So we really have to harvest the Merlot earlier than we did. Otherwise, we get those big and jammy aromas that you may sometime find in the Napa Valley, but we try not to be in this. The style of Bordeaux has changed. We still want to keep this freshness and this fresh fruit, and not too overly ripe or jammy aromas. So, but anyways, right bank, sorry, is more Merlot with Cabernet Sauvignon. The only specificity will be in the pink region, where you have mostly Merlot and Cabernet Franc, not Cabernet Sauvignon. Okay. So that's just it's a darker grape, and it brings dark fruit aromas. It's a nice. I mean, you mostly find this grape in the Loire Valley. In Bordeaux, you have it mostly in the Pomerol Saint-Emilion region, but it does really well there. And those wines are usually a bit more.
Oh, I lost you for a second. Oh, looks like we're having some technical difficulties with Alison right now. I'll stop the screen share and let her internet get back in. Maybe the internet is under curfew, like she was talking about with me before we started our Zoom. So what we're talking about is the fact that the grapes differences on the left bank and right bank, and why they grow things there. Our first one that we were talking about is the Shire de Bordeaux Rosé. Looks like Alison, you're back. You cut off right at the end of what you were talking about. I went ahead and pulled up the Shire de Bordeaux Rosé. So talk about the makeup. I know that you were mentioning like Cabernet Franc and Merlot are mainly on the right bank. That's about where you left us for a second. I then mentioned that maybe your internet was under curfew as well, because that's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
But this is a tech sheet. So when I buy wines, a lot of times the vendors or the importers will send me this. So I have an idea, kind of just like what Alison was saying about the fact that there's, Bordeaux, Bordeaux Superior, or Entre deux Mer on the label of the wine. This kind of is what's in the bottle without, opening it again. So the Chateau Bordes is Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. As Alison was saying, that comes from the Entre deux Mer, so that little kind of triangular shaped area between the two rivers as you go out towards the Atlantic. This is, I think, quite tasty. I drank quite a few bottles over the summer. I think it would do really well with ham or whatever you're doing for Christmas or Thanksgiving. And I don't know, what do you think? What was the idea behind choosing the Cabernet and Merlot in that in this blend versus going for a Cab Franc or something like that?
So for this one, so Chateau Bordes, it's I would say our house wine. So the story of Cheval Cancard is that at the beginning, the chateau where Chateau Bordes is made was a stable at the beginning, and the stable became a winemaking facility, which is called chai in French. Okay. I know you want to say chai, but it's chai.
Yeah, I'll try.
And so we make a white, a red, and a rosé, and we really wanted to have something that was very approachable, like an everyday wine, simple, easy to drink, that you could drink young. And for the rosé, it's really specific because Bordeaux is not very well known for making rosé. Usually when you pick a rosé, you go in the Provence region or maybe in the Côte du Rhône, but you don't find that many rosé from Bordeaux. And in the past, they used to be a little darker, a bit more, much more pink, and maybe a little austere. And I think I'm really happy that you got the 2019, because that was really our transition to something a bit more modern, much more fruit forward, easier to drink, fresh. Like you said, could really goes well with food. Although in the beginning, when people in France were drinking rosé, they were drinking it as an aperitif by itself. But I think now it became a much more not prestigious, because it's still a very approachable wine, but it's much more elegant and has a lot of finesse, but still is a nice everyday wine that you can have with food by itself also. But I think it's something that is nice to discover doing stuff. Cats.
Right.
And
I do the same thing. I'm surprised that one hasn't actually jumped up on the table yet, and I either try to drink my water or be right.
Spirits,
Exactly.
Terrible things.
So
the
really great.
Sorry.
But I think the rosé is really fantastic. Like I like how, like you're saying, light and fresh and very just drinkable, especially when it's chilled down and it's was hot. We still in North Carolina, we still have very weird winters, so it's very possible that it'll be 70 tomorrow or Saturday, and then it's going to be 30 degrees on Christmas Day. So this could easily, if it gets really nice and warm out, you could take this outside, you could drink it, you could barbecue with it if you're able to grill. Obviously cheeses I think do really nicely with this, but that crisp and that fresh, like lively acidity it has, I think is really nice. And it's got a little bit of fruit, but it's not overwhelming. It's not it's just super extracted, which some rosés can be.
Yeah, for this one we had our every year we do like a briefing of what we need, what we think would be best for the markets. And so our winemaker, who actually is retiring at the end of this month, well, in about 7 days, he's a great winemaker, but he's a bit more of the old style. So for him, rosé were more close to reds than to whites, I guess. So a longer maceration between the skins and the juice, a bit, maybe, like you said, a bit more extraction. And we told him that, well, first, in terms of color of the juice, it had to be a bit more pale, just because it this is what we want people to think, is that it's a light wine that you can have for any occasions. Well, usually in the summer, but now it just extends until, because winter's never coming at the moment. Like same in France, it's just a weird weather at the moment. And so it's closer to a white, but still has a bit more red fruit aromas, and I think it was a really nice try for this year, and well, hopefully for the next ones also. But yeah.
Right. Now, is Olivier taking over as the winemaker for this wine as well?
Yeah. He's got a lot of pressure. He's
I bet.
a lot of work to be done, but he will manage.
Yeah. When so obviously the vines are already in the ground, but when do you typically start to see the vines start to grow again after the winter?
So at the moment, of course, they're dormant, and usually we start to see, I would say in the spring, we start to see some leaves and some buds coming, and then we really follow that closely, especially for us. The critical period would be April, May, where we tend to have some frost, and this is when the buds are starting to develop, and it could be really critical if we have some bad weather and cold weather, where it just kills the buds. And then this is why some years we have some bad, low yields, and sometimes, well, that's one of the main issues, the low yields. And then, well, in case of vintages, and I'm going to take the example of the Estephe, because it's 2013, which for us in Bordeaux was a challenging vintage, which doesn't mean it's bad. It was just that it was a challenging vintage because it was wet in the summer. So some regions didn't have as much sun exposure as they should have had. So the grapes struggle to ripen, and this is when you can sometimes have some green aromas, just unripe grapes that were used, and even the green parts, because when we pick the grapes, we usually keep the stems, and sometimes you can bring even the how do you call the seeds inside?
Pips, yeah, the seeds.
Yeah. The pips can be also a little more harsh and have higher tannins, and that's always a challenge in Bordeaux when the summer is not very warm and wet, because, well, first you have this issue of fungal diseases, which can bring rot, and then you lose your crop, or the grapes are not ripening as well as you would want. But we didn't have that this year, which is great. Sometimes we do, sometimes we not. The challenging years were, for us in Bordeaux, the 13 and 17 vintage, but even the 2007. But those vintage were not open and opulent when you drank them after like a couple of years. But I think it's not just my opinion, but they really aged well because there was a higher acidity, and so those were maybe able to have more complex aromas within the years. And I think the Estephe is a really nice example, because of course it's not a fruit forward and high in alcohol and massive wine, but I think it's a really elegant and fine wine that really shows the typicity of its region and terroir. And if you tried the 15 after, you would see that it looks like it's a complete different wine, although it's from the same winery, same winemaker, but just had two different weathers, and so two different winemaking techniques. And I think this is what's at the same time a little it could be scary when you buy Bordeaux, because you never know, but I think it's always a nice discovery. And unless you're a terrible winemaker, the wine you will make is still nice and drinkable. Maybe not the same style as what you would have thought. Like maybe you drink some Estephe and you think it's going to be a big wine, but it's actually going to be a very fine and elegant, and so it's not a big Napa Cab, for example, although there's a Cabernet. But
I think that, like what you mentioned about the terroir and the fact that people don't put wine and produce in the same realm, because it's a farmed thing. You never really know what you're going to get. Because you don't know what the weather is. You don't know if you're going to have that like hot, dry summer that makes you really big, ripe berries, or if you're going to have like kind of, flabby or under kind of grapes. So, and I think also talking about like how the fact that, the Saint Estephe, I'll go ahead and put that text sheet up. The Saint Estephe is what, 7 years old, almost 8 years old at this point. So the fact that it's got some time in the bottle. It's had some time to kind of rest and really kind of just develop some other flavors that if we would have drunk this 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 7 years ago when it was produced, then it doesn't have that kind of that time to really kind of come together and to get it going. So this is Saint Estephe. That's the easy way to say Cossieu Coutelin. Getting there a little bit, but this is I think really fantastic stuff. Both this and the Pomerol that we had with Sophie in the third tasting, I think are really just excellent wines, and just can really show you what Bordeaux can produce. And yeah, so if you want to tell us a little bit about this, as you can see, the makeup is almost 50-50 split for Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon in this left bank of Bordeaux. As this is the Entre deux Mers, like we were just talking about earlier. You've got Pomerol right here. That's what the Bordeaux is. Bordeaux Superior.
Bordeaux, yeah.
Bordeaux, and then this is that like delicious left bank, which is where this wine comes from. So if you want to tell us a little bit about this.
Yes. So as you can see, it's the most northern part of the Médoc region. North of that, there's nothing. You don't want to grow grapes there. So Saint-Estèphe is part of the communal appellations of Bordeaux, of the left bank Bordeaux, which are when you see those names on the label, when you see Saint-Estèphe, when you see Margaux, Pauillac, Saint-Julien, am I missing one? Margaux, Pauillac, Saint-Julien, Saint-Estèphe. No, or Médoc, it's bigger, but I mean those appellations are really prestigious, usually a bit more expensive, just because every appellation on the label means that there are criteria that you have to meet in order to be able to say if you're Saint-Estèphe, well, you have to have a certain amount of yields, you have to plant this amount of vines per hectare, you have to have this level of alcohol, you have to have those grapes, you have to have this winemaking technique, you have to have this wine facility. It's really very strict to make wine in France and in Bordeaux. So reading this appellation, you know that it's not just whoever made it. It has to be someone who has a nice wine facility and knows what he's doing in order to be able to have this appellation. So this, of course, means a little higher price. Of course, Saint-Estèphe will be more expensive than just a regular Bordeaux Supérieur and will be a different style. So most of the time, like I said, it's mostly Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. In that case, it's pretty much 50-50. And so so this wine was purchased in the end of the 20th century by Marcel and Christian Cancard, so the founder of Cheval Cancard. And it's really a small vineyard. And actually, Château Cossieu Coutelin shares its wine cellar with two other wines that we have, which are au Médoc. So it's really it's playing with the Christmas tree. It's just trying to keep me not focused. And so we have one winemaker that manages the three of them, but it's separate vineyards, of course. It's a really classic, traditional wine, I would say. There's nothing, which is the good point with this chateau, is that you will get what you expect from Saint-Estèphe. And the downside is that there's nothing much original about that. But at least if you want to have the perfect feel of what Saint-Estèphe is, I think this is great, and it's very approachable thanks to the Merlot. There's not too much tannins, it's not too dry. You don't need to open it for 3 hours to be able to drink it, especially now that it has some age also. But it's a really pleasant wine, and I think it's still very approachable to anyone, although you're not a big wine drinker. Doesn't dry your palate or anything.
Right. Yeah, I think especially because it has a little bit of age on it too. The acidities get kind of mellowed out, and you get that nice big like darker kind of fruit flavors, but you still get that like it's still full. It's not just like thin, kind of weak, and those tannins are really nicely integrated and kind of fine, and they don't make your lips stick to your teeth, and you can feel it. So this would be great for a lighter cut of steak. I think this would be great with filet mignon, or I would maybe stay away from a really big fatty ribeye personally. But I think for any of your game meats, or even definitely for cheeses and charcuterie, I think this would be a really fantastic wine. It also sees some oak, which not all of your wines do. I mean, I think that's a stylistic from the winemaker's point, but the fact that you're using some French oak in there, and that choice to make as it says, like 60% new. So how many barrels of this did you all produce?
So for this vintage, again, it was not, I need to have my calculator, because I know we produced about, I would say 20,000 bottles a year, which is not much. But this vintage was a little less. It's about 30 barrels max for this one, so it's really a small production. And I see the aging potential. So you could, I mean, it said you could age it if you want. I guess you could, but then it's all depending on your personal point of view. I think this was drinkable 2 years ago, is drinkable now, although it says that it should reach its potential into 2021. I think it's really on your own. I mean, I think the best way of drinking wine, which I'm not trying to ask people to buy a 6-pack, but still, if you like a wine, I think it's nice to have one bottle that you will drink at some point and say, okay, I think I could keep this for a while, and keep maybe 3 bottles aside and have 2 others that you will have whenever you want. But it's a nice, I mean, the wine changes so much in a few years that some years it will be in peak, and some years maybe you will feel like it will close or something. It's a real nice experience. And even when you have it, depending on the temperature you're serving it, so be careful not to serve it too cold, because it will kind of close it. Having a wine at a nice room temperature, not too warm either, because you don't want to have the alcohol that is too too expressive.
Yeah. No, I think right, and the fact that when it's too cold, it kind of closes down the flavors, and all your tongue really tastes is the sensation of cold versus the actual nuance of flavors. And then when it's too warm, you might taste more flavors, but then the alcohol kind of starts to almost evaporate onto your nose, and kind of can then cloud other flavors. Right now my house is like 65, 66 degrees. And I think the wine is a great temperature like that. I suggest for folks to, and especially in the summer, if they want red wine, to throw it in the fridge for 3 to 5 minutes, just to take it down a couple of degrees. And you always hear of what's called cellar temp, or room temp, but room temp is not 72 like it is in the summer here. It's closer to like 62 in a cellar, or even 58 in a cellar. So I think we kind of in general drink a little too warm still. And if we can, especially when you're drinking old world, very classic expression of what Saint Estephe could be, which I think this is very much benchmark, especially of 13, which was a rough year. You can kind of feel the struggle, and it still comes out with this like really beautiful expression of what Bordeaux can be. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really fantastic wine. And again, easy to pair. It's, if you want something that's full bodied but not totally over the top, and like you mentioned, there's none of that big ripe jammy characters. If anything, there's there's kind of blackberries or maybe some dark cherry in there, but I get almost like licorice and kind of spices especially from the oak aging, and there's almost like a brambliness to it. I think, like you were saying, from the pips and the leaving it on the stem, you get a little bit of that kind of woodsiness, which adds a nice kind of savory backbone, so it's not kind of soft and flabby. So it's really, really tasty stuff.
So either you could keep it if you want, drink it now and get what you just described, which was great. And if you keep it, well, it all depends on. Some people think that drinking very, very old wines is much better because you get it's so special. But I had once a Saint Julien that was 1953, and everyone was really enthusiastic about this one. And of course, it's amazing. You're drinking something that is over 50 years old, so you're like, oh wow. But I felt it really depends. I don't think I'm a big fan of old wines, just because you don't get those primary aromas, which are fruit, and those fresh aromas. You just get those tertiary notes of wet leaves and dust, and which is amazing. How can just grape juice become this?
Sure.
But still, it just depends if you want to have this type of flavor or not. I think at the moment it's the best, and it's enjoyable by anyone, which is great. There's no big, you're not afraid of someone being like, oh, this is weird, I'm not getting it. At least it's accessible to anyone.
Yeah, it's not polarizing. Like, it's not going to turn anybody off unless they just hate red wine.
Yeah.
There's a few people out there like that, but in general, like, you could open this up, you could pour a glass. It's gonna do well with almost everything and be very approachable for everyone. And I find that to a lot of your wines. I think, especially stuff that we have at the co-op, are like, they're meant to be drunk now. I'm not buying wine that you need to wait 50 years to drink. You can on some of them. You could lay it down for probably 10 or 15 years, and then, like you were saying, buy a couple bottles, drink one now, and then, as a kind of treat to yourself or as a special occasion or whatever, then see how it kind of progresses over the years. And that would be, pretty fun, thing to do with your friends and family.
You could do it. And if you feel like you have to do it, you could do it, but you're not missing anything incredible if you're not doing it. Like, it's not going to be so much better. It's just going to be a little different, but it's not going to be a complete different wine in 10 years. It's just going to be a little, different.
Yeah, it changes, but it's not necessarily going to be like, I wish I didn't drink those other 9 bottles over the last 10 years. It's more of a kind of the trip or the journey that the bottle has taken. And like you said, it started off as this like fresh, fuller body kind of thing, and then it's like transitioned and developed all these layers of the tannins and the alcohol and the esters and all of the flavors that the grapes have kind of hidden inside of them, slowly unlocking. But it's not necessarily it doesn't have to be a revelation.
No.
And like with really old wine, it's not like you're sitting down and having a meal and that's what you're drinking as your kind of palate cleanser. That is the focus. For me, when I open a really nice bottle of wine, I want to share it with people. I don't want to, and have that experience together versus, pouring a glass, drinking it, pouring another glass.
Yeah.
It's not what it's for. It's to appreciate the fact that, some farmers grew these grapes and then a winemaker turned it into wine and then figured out how to age it so then it would last 7 years in this case right now, because I just opened this bottle this afternoon. Or if you want to wait for, especially with the Pomerol that we have from the Vieux Cardinal, that has another, I don't know, it's a 2016, which was a fantastic year for you guys.
You can keep it another 10 years, I guess. Yeah.
Right, exactly. If you have that much, which would be at that point, 14 years old, and maybe even stretch it to 20 if you wanted to. So, that would be, it's a fun thing to do. See how it changes. See, what Bordeaux, kind of tasting like a time capsule of flavor, and see kind of how it changes. But
then again, it mustn't be something that prevents people from trying it, because storing wine, you have to have a room that if there's no direct sunlight, if there's no vibration, you have to have a stable temperature, not too cold, not too warm, not too much humidity. There are so many criteria that, if you keep a great bottle of wine for 10 years in bad condition and you open it and it's just bad because it didn't age well, it's so disappointing. So might as well just drink it whenever you can, and it's fine. You'll drink something else another time. It's something that, and I don't know what's the perception of Bordeaux for people in Durham, for example, but I feel like, and maybe it would have been the case because maybe we're not very good at communicating, but Bordeaux, I think it could be a little intimidating for people because it's hard to, what's Estephe, how is Estephe Bordeaux, and why you say Bordeaux sometimes, and why grapes, and why blends, and what's in the blend, I don't even know, it's not on the label. But I think we really improved throughout the years. Again, having more modern facilities, making wines, and being able to actually counter those natural effects of winter, spring, and bad temperature, bad rain, and frost and everything. So even now, if we have, of course, it will be better if the weather is perfect. But if the weather is bad, well, unless there's a hurricane that disturbs everything, there's nothing we can do. But if it's just rain and humidity, there's so many ways we can actually at least try to rebalance the wine and maybe change the blend, because that actually is one big way of managing. For example, like I said, the Merlot, which ripens earlier than Cabernet Sauvignon, is the most the grape that is the most impacted by global warming. So in some wines we tend to put a little less Merlot, and we add another grape which I mentioned, Petit Verdot, to just rebalance the acidity, the tannins, and the aroma, so we don't get this just big and floppy Merlot that will be a little too ripe.
Too soft, and like you were saying, more on that kind of like ripe and cooked fruit and jammy fruit that Bordeaux is not known for. If you want that, then Central Coast, California, Napa, Lodi, like you can get some really big, like almost juicy wines, which are great on their own, but that's not what Bordeaux is known for. And and you wouldn't put a sticker on a bottle of wine of Bordeaux that wasn't that style. You might do Vin de France, or you might do other sub labels that you can kind of get away with, so you still can sell your wine. It just might not be what the original intent was, but it's really neat. I mean, I think it's great. I mean, obviously people have been growing wine in Bordeaux for hundreds of years now, and so you obviously know that these climate things are coming and how to kind of adjust. The fact that you do have the ability to blend in different grapes, so you can still get the stylistic of the house that is producing the wine. So that's really neat.
Yes, and it's growing, and even more. And now we're Bordeaux and other countries, of course. I mean, regions and countries wants to adapt to the global trends, and of course, the environment is a key issue at the moment. So many wineries are transitioning to organic, and actually, Chez de Bordes is this vintage is how do you say? What would you say? It's trained organically.
Yeah,
okay, but you can't say it because we have to have 3 years to be able to put on the label it's organic, but it's trained organically. And even if it's good that we're trying to change and to use less chemicals and less pesticides, but in some years, like if in 2017 you were doing organic, I'm sure you lost at least 80% of your harvest because the rain got it all, and the diseases and everything. And if you can't treat, and sometimes, which is one of the key issues in Bordeaux, is that when you use a chemical, which doesn't mean it's going to destroy the environment, but when you use something that is not natural, you treat once and then you're done. When it's something that is more natural, usually you have to go in the vineyards more often, which means using the tractor, and you use more gas in the tractor, and then you damage the soil, and then it's just, there are so many things that we're trying to adapt. It's really a big challenge because there's the demand of the market, but also this will of the winemakers, because it's not just market issues. You have to, you want to think that you're making a good wine and you're not destroying the planet at the same time. But it's really difficult in Bordeaux sometimes versus in the Languedoc region in the southeast of France, which is dry and warm all the time. But yeah, I think it's great because, like you said, it's agriculture. So every year is different. You can't do the same thing every year. You have to adapt and change, and you won't have the same result. It will be similar, but there will be this house signature, but it will be a different wine every year. But it's always good. Like we say, every year is great.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. If there's anything else you'd like to add real quick, please feel free. And hopefully we can chat about wine again soon. This has been very fun.
Yes, I hope so. And I really hope that everyone will will enjoy the wines. I think they're really a nice overview. And like I said, even if we can't travel, it's a nice way to discover new regions and we cover. And I'm really glad you did this showcase, that we have every wines in Bordeaux pretty much showcased in your
that was the goal, is trying to get a little bit from everything, so that way you could, like, I think what you just said is great, like you can kind of go somewhere without necessarily leaving your house, and you can taste what Entre deux Mers produces. You can taste what the Medoc and Saint Estephe produces. You can taste what Pomerol produces, and really get a sense. And then the Cedron is from even further south.
Yeah.
So that, again, it kind of really kind of swoops all the way around Bordeaux, and for a 6-pack, you can taste through. This kind of ties up our virtual tastings. So thank you very much. So thank you, Alison, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Yes. Thank you so much. And in the meantime, happy holidays, and enjoy. I don't know if you will have vacation, but enjoy your time.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm taking a couple days, so it'll be nice. Yeah.
Nice rest. Well deserved.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.